Hello, and today we'll be going over more about PHP variables and syntax. So just to go over this again, remember that you first you want to run your exam, and then in here you click start to start the PHP server. And then once it's started, you click the Explorer, this folder right here, to open up the folder, then htdocs, and then right here index.php, that's our PHP file. Just to go over this again. And let's open this, or no, we need to open Chrome. So and then in Chrome we go localhost, and we have our code right here. All right. So now we went over variables in syntax. Let's go over a different type of variable called a constant. A constant you define like this. You write const, then you type in whatever, and then the value of it. So let's go like this, test. The difference between a constant and a variable is that variables you can change, but constants you cannot. So let's create a variable called var is equal to variable, or let's make var is equal to 1. All right, then let's echo test dot var. Now if we $var, so then right here, if we can do test is equal to, then here we can write test, or we can write this will not work. And then if we go $var and then make it equal to, then we try to print it again. Right here we get an error with the test because the constants, as the name suggests, they cannot be changed. They are the same value at all times. So because of this, we cannot use the equal function for a test because it cannot be changed. So if we comment this out, the variable can be changed, but the constant will always remain the same. And so this is useful if you want to keep something constant and not accidentally be able to change it. Now, there's a debugging method that allows you to test variables, and that's called var dump right here. Let's create a break right here. Here you go. So what this var dump is it basically shows you the type of variable and the value of the variable inside the parentheses. So if I change var to a string, for example, test string, and I refresh the page, it will now say it's a string with a length of 11 and test string, like that. So this is a useful debugging tool. If you're ever having errors, you can then use var dump to be able to see if there's any like problems. Like let's say that you're trying to take a number from the user to do some math with, and it's giving you an error, and you try to figure out why, and you do the var dump, and it turns out that it's reading the number 11 as a string instead of an integer. Var dump is useful for figuring things out like that. So yes, there's var dump. And then speaking of variable types, let's go over the different types of variables. So there are multiple types of variables in PHP, and they form three different categories. The first category is called scalar variables. And so I'll be using the var dump right here to show you what I'm talking about here. So okay. So right here we have our var dump. Let's put as a number first. So here, okay, so here will tell us the type and then the value right here. So let's go over the different values that are possible. So first off are booleans. So these are the true false values right here. Boolean true. Next you have integers, which are just numbers, but that are not decimals, whole numbers, integers. Next is the floats, which are numbers with a decimal point. And finally you have strings right here. So these are the scalar values. Next you have compound values. And so these we've seen before. These are string arrays. So right here it's an array. This is a compound data type. And then the other one is an object, and an object is much more complicated in PHP than it is in JavaScript. I'll go over this quickly, but we'll cover objects later on in PHP. But to create a object, we would do class, object class, and then we do public value. Okay, and then var is equal to new object class, like this. So here, so we have an object. So this is an object. If you see an object, you know, understand that it's a very complicated data structure. It's nothing like we've seen before with JavaScript or arrays. We'll be covering this in a later class, but just keep this in mind. So the reason why this is important is because a class is a part of something called object-oriented programming. And if anyone is familiar with other programming languages like C++, C#, all that, those are all object-oriented, and all those use classes. Like most programming languages, I would say, use classes and objects. And so because JavaScript also uses classes, but it's not a part of the core object. It's not something that you'll be using as website creators as much, unless you're doing very complicated computer programming. But in PHP, it's a lot more useful because you're doing essentially back-end programming where all the logic and all that is done. So keep this in mind. And then we have the special, which are essentially, so let's get rid of this. We have the null. So we just declare right about here, we have a null, which gives us a warning because you know it's a null. And the other one is a resource, which is a lot more complicated, and we'll cover that later on. So the data types for PHP are booleans, integers, float, strings, arrays, objects, and null. So let's go back to the previous problem we talked about, where we wanted to read a number, but instead it's read as a string, right? So we want to convert this string into a number. How is that done? This is done through a process called typecasting, and so it's quite simple. We do var is equal to, and then in parentheses we type whatever data type we want to convert it to. So in this case, we're trying to convert it to an integer, and then dot var. So this takes the number as a string, and then this reads the string and converts it to an integer and assigns it back to itself. So now if we refresh, it's an integer. So let me show you the different types of ones. So you have the integer. You can also do the changes to true. You can change this to BOL for boolean, and we'll change it to a boolean true. You have int for integer. You also have float if this was a decimal number. And then you also have string. So string, and if this was just a float, the float is converted to a string right here. And then you also can convert it to an array. So this is an array of 1. If we had a string, I believe, will this work? No, it will not, right? It will just make it an array of 1. And then you can also convert it into an object right here. So that is typecasting. Now let's quickly go over operators, because they're the exact same as they are in JavaScript. So if I have two variables, so var and let's say var1 and var2, let's make it 12 and 5, right? So echo, and then in here we can say 12 plus 5, and we'll say 17 right here. So you can do all the basic maths. You have plus, minus, times, divided by, and we haven't used this, but we also have modulus, which if you don't remember from the JavaScript lesson, just Google what modulus is. MODULUS, modulus, because it's useful in some programming cases. So modulus, these are all the arithmetic operators. You also have different comparison operators, and for that we have the if statement. So if $var1 is greater than $var2, echo true, and then else echo false right here. So this will say true. You have greater than, less than, equal, all those comparison operators. You also have the logical operators, the and, or. Then you also have one more, which is different from, you also have the exclamation mark, which is the not. And then you also have one more that isn't in JavaScript, and that's XOR or XOR or exclusive OR. So what this is with and if we have, let's say we have A and B, then you also have A or B, right? So with the double and, if both A and B are true, then the result is true. If with the or, if A or B is true, then it becomes true. But also with or, if both A and B are true, then it will also be true. So if you want, if A or B is true, but if both of them are true, then be false. That's where XOR comes in. So A XOR B means that if both A and B are true, then it will say false. Only if only A or only B is true, then XOR will give a true value. So that's the comparison operators. Then you also have the incremental and decremental. So you have the plus plus, minus minus. So we can do echo plus plus dollar var1. So right here it says 13. So var is not equals var2, then plus plus var1, which gives 13. And if you do var1 plus plus, it will say 12 because it's added after being printed. Then you also have the concatenation operator, which we've seen before. It's this dot. So if you want to combine multiple things together, then you can use the dot. So right here it says false space 12. Then you have the various assignment operators. So you got echo var 1 plus equals var 2. So that assigns var 1 plus var 2 and assigns it to var 1. You have a divided equals, times equals, and then you also have one more, which is the concatenate equals, which means the two numbers are combined. So 12 and 5 become 125. So that's the concatenate. Then we have all the different keywords right here. So we have the if else. We also have else if, or let's do here. Else if var 1 is equal to 12. Right here. If else. Then you also have the switch. So switch var 1. Then we have case 12. You remember this, break. The case. Then you have the for loop. So for. Now the thing with the for loop in PHP is it doesn't have the for in or for of that JavaScript does. So if you want to loop through something, you need to do $i is equal to 0. $i is less than whatever it is, the length. $i plus plus. So it doesn't have the $i of $var1. You have to do it like this, the long form. So it will create the loop. So we can do echo $i and it will print. And so one more thing that PHP for loop do that JavaScript doesn't is it's able to do an infinite loop. So if you do just the double colon, it will loop this for loop forever or until the server crashes. So this might be useful if you want to have something that repeats. Like, let's say you want to run a function. You run a function right here. Then you make it wait for like 1 second, and then if true, then we want to break like this. So you can create an infinite loop just by doing the double semicolons right here. Then you also have the while loop and do while loop, which is similar to the for loop, where we have the while var 1 is equal to 12. Then echo $var1 plus plus. So print it only once. Then you have the while, the do while, which is the same thing. So those are the basics of the PHP syntax with all the keywords, variable controls, and operators.